quantum mechanics-driven AI solving the nuclear fusion problem.
Oh.
And does that lead to abundant free electricity and then desalinated water? And what happens then?
Well, that would be absolutely paradigm shifting.
It would just change everything.
Oh, the whole world. Welcome to the Land and Everything Else podcast. I am Craig Lemoine and so excited to be here at my third ever People's Company Land Expo. This is the first one where the weather's been nice enough to leave the building, and that's been a really good time. And I'm joined today by my new friend Ed. We spent some time together at a holiday party. We spent some time together at dinner. And so I'd love you to introduce yourself, a little bit about who you are and what you do, and we'll have a great conversation today.
Thank you, Craig. So Ed Blundy from England. This is my second time at the Land Investment Expo. You're absolutely right. It was significantly colder this time last year, sort of 0 Fahrenheit, which is, I think I recorded that it was, of course, we're in Celsius and centigrade. It was minus 22 wind chill factor, which is just unheard of in the UK. So, so now I think there's talk of it being 50, is it?
I left in a sport coat yesterday and walked outside. Okay. Like, that was unheard of.
So my lips essentially froze off last year, and they haven't done yet this year. So it's great to be back. Anyway, so I'm here. My business is Brown Co, based in the UK. We are a property and business consultancy, predominantly rural focused. Sort of 65% of our turnover is from the rural sector. We have at high level, there are probably 350 of us odd in total. We're a private partnership, 40 partners, with about a dozen offices in the UK, and then offices in Poland and Romania, and a small office in St. Lucia in the Caribbean. We provide property and business services to not just the UK, but also agricultural and rural clients around the world. And one of the reasons we're here, following up from our attendance here last year, was we launched the International Ag Alliance this time last year.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, and then I want to learn a little more about you.
Okay.
So to give you some perspective, a lot of our listeners, it's an intersection of financial advisors in the U.S., insurance agents in the U.S., and then there are some ever-growing academic listeners who are probably friends of mine more than anything. Mm-hmm. And then we also have quite a few folks in land and real estate and peoples, just to give you a perspective of who's listening to this podcast. Understood. As a background. Yeah. But I'd love to talk about sort of your journey into ag. We talked a little about it at dinner last night, but I think that's worth noting and a good conversation for our friends. So how did you get into agribusiness?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking. It's something we're not interested in the UK. We don't talk about ourselves or our journeys. And I've noticed in the US, you all like talking about each other and people.
Well, so you may be inspiring people right now you haven't met yet. So
yeah. So my story is that neither of my parents are farmers, but all of their parents were farmers. So my grandparents were farmers. They were my parents were the youngest of their siblings, so had to go and find their own way in life. But I grew up around agriculture. It was, something that I knew was always going to be a part of my life. And so after school, I went off to agricultural college to learn how to farm with other people's money. I wasn't going to inherit the family farm, and so I had to sort of do it a different way.
Okay.
So I went off and did that, probably spent too long at agricultural college. I always used to find another course to do. I quite enjoyed it. And in the UK, we mix it up with placement years. So you'll have a year in and then a year out and a year back in, and, just sort of getting different experience in different sectors, whether that's sort of, in my case, was working on a farm for a couple of years, selling agricultural lime for a year or two. And, there are opportunities to get experience doing all sorts of different things in the space. The ag sector is quite a broad church. And if you want to go and specialize in a particular part of it, or even just get experience in a different part of it, then you can do. So I did that for a long time. And the story I tell people is that in my farm management lectures, towards the end of the course, my farm management lecturer would start talking about something really interesting, land-based, some real nitty-gritty, interesting, intellectual, cerebral things, and then would cut it off and say, but you don't need to worry about that. That's what the land agents deal with. So you don't need to worry about it. That's the end of the class. Bye for now. And I would sit there thinking, what was
but
he
there's
about
more.
to say?
I want to know more.
That was just getting interesting.
A real thirst for knowledge.
Exactly. So I sort of had a word with my course leaders and said, look, I don't know what that's all about, but that's what I'm interested in. That's floating my boat. Can you help? And at the end of my sort of time at that university, I'd arranged to go off to Australia with a friend of mine to go and experience life over there. And just before we went, I got the call saying, actually, if you want to go off to land agent school at university, then Ed, we've got your space and you can jump on that course if you like. So that was a difficult conversation, but I chose to go to university instead of Australia. I always figured I'd find my way there sooner or later.
Sure.
Anyway, and so I went off to university and studied land management, rural enterprise and land management, the course was called. And so did that, graduated in 2001 or 2, got my first job. In fact, in my degree, we had a year out there as well. So I had 16 months working down in the southeast of England, which is a lot of high value planning work.
Okay.
And then went back to university, graduated and got a job in the village where my parents live, which was a masterstroke, I thought, because my desk was sort of a mile away from my bed.
Sure.
When I was living at home. And then I met my now wife and ended up having to drive and commute an hour away. So, went wrong straight away. But of course, it led to where I am now. So yeah, the rest is history.
Well, that's a great story. And I think the education piece, the practical piece of that is meaningful. And also the idea that you grew up in agriculture, but not necessarily owning agriculture, but knowing that was a field. I think that's an important element for a lot of folks. And my wife is a farmer. So we now live on a farm and it's just always been there. And now I get to sort of do what I do as a living. I've always been part of the rural economy. So I'd like to talk a little more about the kind of Brown Co. and your approach to land management, your approach to brokerage, and if you could just kind of give some broad strokes in those worlds and other things that you do as well there.
Okay. So from a Brown Co. perspective, I say 2/3 of the firm is rural.
Okay.
The other third is not. But when the firm was created as a management buyout from an insurance business, we sort of vowed never to touch residential or commercial property again. But of course, what happens is that your farming clients come to you and you start working with them and they sort of drop into the conversation that they've got a cottage they need to let or manage or dispose of or what have you. So you find that you need to put somebody on residential property detail.
Yeah, I bet you do.
And then there's, before you know it, there's a set of redundant farm buildings on the farm somewhere that, no one's quite sure what to do with. And so, okay, well, we can put our planning team on that and then we can change the use to a commercial use and then find a commercial tenant and let it and put the lease in place and manage it for you. And before you know it, you're back into residential and commercial. And
you're full service at that point.
Exactly. So that's what that does. But from the rural sector that I'm in Brown Co., that's split into two sort of pillars, land agency and farm business consultancy or agribusiness consultancy. I'm on the land agency side of that. And whereas the ABC folks deal with the business of farming, so they'll be dealing with sort of budgeting and cash flows and contract farming agreements and stewardship and schemes and projects and the business of farming. And the land agency side, we are property focused. So we will deal with agency, valuation, development, farm machinery sales, estate management, professional services and infrastructure. Infrastructure is a big deal. That includes pipes, wires, roads, rail, renewables, telecoms,
very
all
much
that sort of stuff. And so they're the two distinct sort of pillars of the rural side of Brown & Co. And they might seem siloed, but they're organized.
I think they all
internally
overlap to some extent.
But if somebody comes in from the outside and wants Brown & Co. to do the job, then they get the whole thing.
They get the service.
Exactly.
So you mentioned that, yes, you're centralized, but also global as a company. So there are properties around the world that you're managing and working with?
Yeah. Our clients take us to those places. There was no specific ambition or strategy to open an office in Poland or Romania.
Sure.
But back in the day, we worked with clients whose aspirations took them overseas. And so we would go and help them identify and buy land in places where we thought opportunity was there, where land prices were low. There was an ability to, I hate to use the phrase, but probably westernize and improve the infrastructure and the management techniques in some of those places. And so the client had the investment appetite and the capital to go and do it. And so that's what happened. And then once you buy one, then you can buy another and you become the expert. And then all of a sudden you need an office and staff and all the support that goes with it. So that's how that started. And then, of course, once you've done the first one and nobody else is doing it, then you're the expert. And it just snowballs from that point.
And did this get you to Australia finally?
It did, yeah. We actually acted for a sort of a Middle Eastern sovereign wealth fund amongst other people, and they asked us to do some due diligence on an acquisition in Australia, and that got me over there. Since then, of course, we have formed the Alliance, the Ag Alliance, and LAWD. I was going to say based in Brisbane. I think their head office might be in Brisbane, but they've got offices all over the country. And yeah, so now we have an alliance partner with boots on the ground over there, and those links are being forged, and they're closer every day. And we speak once a month via Zoom. The time zones are a challenge. It's always either early in the morning or the middle of the night for somebody. So we try and rotate that as much as we can to make it fair.
Share the pain between the parties.
Yeah. But it became pretty clear that we all sort of share the same mindset and paradigms of what we're trying to achieve. It's all about service. I sort of talk about profitable service with a smile. You know, we're in business, we've got to make money, but ultimately we're here to provide a service for our clients. That's what it's all about. If we can't deliver that, then we have no business, whether it's profitable or not. But we all spend so long, it's such a big fraction of our lives doing this that we have to enjoy it. If we didn't, then what would be the point? Yeah.
Well, and I think a service mindset is certainly going to lead to more longevity than a transactional mindset. No question about that.
Yeah.
Right. So the theme that I'm getting out of this event, and for those of you listening in that aren't here, there's a lot of conversation around matching kind of the family office level wealth with opportunities in agriculture, right? And maybe a few years from now, that gets even to a more retail conversation, but it's not where we're at today.
Sure.
Institutional wealth, from the standpoint in the U.S. anyway of, large state pension funds, insurance reserves, has really adopted commercial real estate as an asset class, and very much so in a lot of their accounts. And so I wanted to get in a little bit on where your perspective from a more global position and less U.S. domestic position, where have you seen opportunities to collaborate institutionally, or opportunities where wealth is looking for ag as an asset?
Yeah.
Or I just kind of like to get your take on it as a different perspective than perhaps a domestic one.
Okay. So we're here at the Land Investment Expo. We've heard a lot about the family office as a potential new entrant to the investor landscape. Certainly in the UK, we've had contact with and acted with family offices all the time, but perhaps as we've had it described to us, we're at this interface between the money and the mud.
Okay,
if you like.
I like that. That's a good way to say it.
Yeah, and so we've got an education process to deliver and perform. And we've got to understand exactly what they're in it for, or what the attraction is for them. I think everybody knows that, for a balanced portfolio, then land serves a good purpose. The correlations with inflation and the negative correlations with equities and all the things we talk about all the time. So yeah, we can go any number of ways with this, but certainly in the UK, you've heard about the inheritance tax sort of furore that's that is taking place and unfolding at the moment. We've dubbed it the family farm tax. It is.
You might share with our listeners who may not know that.
Okay, so for the last several decades, agricultural land has been exempt from inheritance tax.
Okay.
So you can pass down the farm to the next generation tax-free, which happens in most mature economies. Anyway, our current government has decided to remove that exemption. For anything, it's now £2.5 million, but for a long time, or since it was announced, it was going to be £1 million. So 2 million between a married couple.
Oh, that's not a lot in
which
today's
barely
land
covers
prices.
the machinery.
No,
before you get to the farm.
That's certainly not a lot of coverage.
So it was just, I mean, it went down like a lead balloon. It's to be rolled out in April. And the biggest, saddest sort of feature of it all was that those people who are towards the end of their lives were faced with the impossible dilemma of thinking, okay, so this works and I can pass the farm on tax-free if I'm not here by April. And I mean, no family should ever be in that situation.
No, they shouldn't.
It's just cruel. And I think we would hope that's being acknowledged. Anyway, just before Christmas, the £1 million threshold was raised to 2.5
per person.
Per person. Yeah.
So 5 for the household.
5 for the
£5
household.
million.
If there is, a partner or spouse to share that with.
It's still not enough.
So it's an improvement.
It's an improvement, but it's not going to cover.
But you're $10 million each or $15 million
farms
in,
or something
in the US.
like that.
So yeah, it's it helps a number of people, but it still exposes too many people to the spectre of having to pay tax. And of course, there's no margin at the moment to pay the tax.
Right.
You can pay it over 10 years in installments. But if you sort of go and Google the economics of that, then
that's rough.
You're essentially.
I mean, you inevitably are going to have to borrow or create some kind of liquidity for this issue.
Yeah, I mean, there's talk of it being a voluntary tax. So if you do your tax planning well enough, then you don't have to pay it. But that involves making a lifetime transfer and giving removing it from your estate and then surviving 7 years,
or additional insurance costs, things like that.
You can insure.
Sure.
But then we've all got stories of people who've tried to go and get the policy. And
when
you
you're in your 70s or 80s, that's very difficult
Precisely.
to do to begin with. Yeah.
Yeah. So my point was going to be that in the context of this inheritance tax issue, there are actually a bunch of people holding capital who've never heard of natural capital or farmland as an asset class.
Okay.
Who have now been introduced to the fact that there is relief available on farmland. It's half as good as it was, but it's still 100% better than no relief.
Now you may have individuals that perhaps made money in other businesses or other areas saying, wait a minute, if I can buy this land, then I can pass this without the inheritance tax.
Then I get some relief.
Yeah.
And so, we've spoken to a few sort of private banks and wealth managers in the UK who all of a sudden are wanting to know more about this thing called farmland. And so we'll see where it goes, how it unfolds. But it's interesting, the market needs participants. We act for a lot of sellers of land in the UK, and of course, early conversation around the kitchen table is, well, who's going to buy it? I want out, or I want to change things, or I just want to offload a bit of offlying land or something strategic. Who's going to buy it? And so now on the sort of the list of prospective potential buyers is the sort of the investor from out of town.
Interesting, which also creates some social dynamics in the town. I would imagine, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's the farmer is still buying a lot of land in the UK, but a lot of transactions are tax driven, but with capital gains tax transactions. So if a farmer or landowner has had a windfall, they've got some development money, or maybe energy or solar or wind money, whatever it is. But if it's a capital sum, then that can be rolled over into qualifying land within 3 years, and there's no tax to pay. No capital gain.
So we have a similar 1031 exchange situation here where you can continue to roll gains, moving those forward.
Yeah, you can go back 1 year or forwards 3 years.
Okay.
And you can shelter the cash from tax, and so that's what a lot of buyers have been for the last years and years and years.
Cutting into the estate issue, the lead balloon that you're discussing, in the United States, we have some interesting dynamics on which state you live in.
Okay.
And in Illinois, for example, there is a state death tax that kicks in aggregate estates over about $4 million. This tax will kick in.
Okay.
Federally, you have very much higher levels today, and you have something called portability. So if I don't use mine, it rolls to my spouse. So she winds up getting, my whatever $14 million exemption plus hers. So she winds up being able to defer an awful lot. Okay. On the state hand, though, state of Illinois has kept older limits. So you have some interesting dynamics to that end in states with death taxes where the farm is probably not going to trigger a federal estate liability. It is going to trigger a state liability. And so you may think, oh my gosh, we've got these incredibly high estate tax deductions. And when they do kick in, they're about 40%. So I'm kind of happy they're high. But from a state of Illinois standpoint, you're going to get hammered without planning appropriately, because the state of Illinois is going to come and say, well, that's great. You don't owe the U.S. government, but you're going to owe us a certain amount of money.
Yeah.
And so even sometimes for the best news on a federal estate tax plan, from a local standpoint, you still get hammered. So there's a lot to do around the world, I think, to that end.
You're right. It doesn't really matter where you are or where you're having the conversation. It seems that, there's always a million.
Asset transfer is important. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to talk a little more about is this sort of global alliance that y'all have set up. And walk me through a little bit. What is that? What isn't it? And how's it been going?
It's been going really well. We launched it sort of formally this time last year.
Okay.
And the previous 12 months to that had been a lot of planning and how is this going to work? What we're going to do? Monthly calls, trying to figure it out. But, sooner or later, you've just got to get on with it. So we decided to get on with it this event last year and see what happens. We'll iterate, see what works, what doesn't. But the idea fundamentally is to collaborate and see if we can remove some of the friction and viscosity in the capital markets and, the conversations that are happening between institutional investors into farmland around the world. Simple as that. And if we can do that by working with our colleagues, in the US and Australia, and we've got a secondary partner from New Zealand as well.
Oh, okay.
Then that we realized that we were all talking to the same people. And that they were interested in a diversified portfolio around the world to mitigate for political risk and climate change, whatever else it's going to be. And so we thought, okay, well, let's make sure that we're all having the same conversation, make sure we're aligned, make sure we share information and people. We're talking about staff exchanges as well, so sending younger colleagues, or any colleague really, but tends to be the younger ones with fewer commitments.
That are interested in
exactly. And send them around the world and share. And it's been working. I mean, we've issued a few white papers. We want to bring together our collective knowledge of what's going on, who's participating in the market, what the general trends are in every country that we're looking at. Brown Co's role in the alliance is to sort of cover the UK and Europe and South America. Actually, we've been active in South America for quite a long time. And then obviously People's Company is dealing with the US, and then LAWD in Australia, and Aratahi is the New Zealand partner.
Okay.
There's a lot of horticulture and timber and dairy in that part of the world. So between us, we think we've got most sort of investment opportunities covered. They're all different. They're all very different. Australia is all about the scale. Central Europe, Poland, Romania, those sorts of places are all about the scale. You can invest and deploy a lot of capital in fewer transactions. Same down in South America. The UK and certain parts of the US maybe not so much. It's smaller units.
Sure.
But the diversity of cropping around the world is just pretty intoxicating. You've got. I haven't yet found a crop that one of us doesn't deal with. So.
Well, I do think it's interesting from a perspective of someone wanting to deploy capital. That alliance is extraordinarily attractive because my ability to take an amount in and say, okay, well, now let's diversify this in the world of ag, and the ability to do that relatively quickly and working together as opposed to bidding against one another probably makes things go a little smoother.
Yeah, hence the sort of aspiration to remove the viscosity, because there are plenty of barriers. It's difficult to do this sort of stuff. And so if we can help that by making sure we've got the right person and the right connection in the right place at the right time, then we stand a chance of making the transactions go more smoothly. It isn't all about agency. We do a lot of valuation work in our respective firms as well. And so if there's a way we can share information and resource and market evidence to help the appraisal and valuation process, then that'd be
I think
good positive.
More data can often be helpful in that situation, no question.
It's all about the data now.
So with kind of that, let's pivot into another area. Where do you see trends in agriculture going in the next 1 to 5 years?
It's difficult. I mean, at the moment, it's all about commodity prices and input costs. Farming isn't making any money. Broadacre commodable cropping is not viable, it seems, at the moment. Nobody's very happy, and especially in the UK, we've had the subsidy rug pulled from under us. So we're now approaching our first harvest with completely unsubsidized, which is a shock to the system.
Oh, absolutely.
And there will be some collateral damage for sure. So let's just see what happens with commodity prices in particular. You've had your challenges with tariffs and sort of market disruption with certainly based here in Iowa. I hear a lot about soybeans and challenges around that. Nobody seems to know exactly what's going to happen. I was listening to a talk earlier on saying that February will be the key month. If China takes a few soybeans in February, then maybe things aren't quite as bad. But if they don't, then what?
Right.
But that's a bit too specific, perhaps. I think the same problems are there around the world. Obviously, we've got livestock, which is on fire. Everybody's making a ton of money out of livestock production. In the UK specifically, fresh produce is doing okay. But yeah, potatoes and broadacre cropping and the sugar markets are pretty tough. I would like to think that that's going to change. But back to the UK for a moment, I think if the lack of subsidies means that all of a sudden loads of businesses are just not viable, then there will be some serious restructuring and there will be some exits. And that will not necessarily be the right answer for some of those businesses, but it might be the only answer.
Sure.
I talk to the banks a lot and ask them whether people have run out of money yet, and the answer is no, not yet. But I don't want to be negative or pessimistic about it, but I have this concern that if I ask the banks the same question in 12 months' time, there's going to be a few more yeses. So that's a challenge. I was talking to some people earlier on about technology. I think technology is going to have a much bigger role to play. We sort of got down into the weeds of technology and energy and sort of the fusion world and AI, sort of quantum mechanics driven AI solving the nuclear fusion problem. And does that lead to abundant free electricity and then desalinated water? And what happens then?
Well, that would be absolutely paradigm shifting.
It would just change everything.
Oh, the whole world.
I don't think it's to answer your question about what happens in the next 1 to 5 years, but who knows? There's a whole bunch of things that happen before we expect them to. And so, I can't help but think about some of that, the big picture paradigm shift things. Until that point, then it's people just trying not to run out of money, trying to get their tax planning sorted out. Hoping for some kinder weather. Again, in the UK, last year was extremely dry. It focuses or forces people to focus on water management. We're an island surrounded by water. Right. You'd think it wasn't a big deal, but actually
it is.
Water on, water off is essential. And the more I talk to people around the world, they're facing exactly the same problem. So yeah, commodity prices, ag inflation, water, tech, and then the people, of course. You've got to try and retain the right people doing what you need to do. It's a team sport, not just what we do, but farming and the whole ag sector is a team sport. So
that was a fantastic answer, Ed. I really appreciate it.
I can't even remember what the question was, but I'm pleased you liked it.
I enjoyed it. Well, Ed, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I know our listeners are going to love the global perspective you've brought. Right. And I really appreciate your insights and how you got here and where we go from now. My pleasure. Thank you very much, Ed.
I hope we can do it again sometime.
It's great talking with you.
Likewise. Thanks.